All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our virtual conversation entitled People Plus Place Equals Vacant Building Program. This discussion will be recorded and made available in the future with both English and Spanish closed captions. We encourage you to ask questions using the Q&A box. Your first question might actually be, why is it called People Plus Place Equals Vacant Building Program? Basically, it's because we strive to center people in our work in this program. Some of that's baked into the program itself, as you'll see during our talk today, as well as in how we choose to approach in dealing with this complex issue. So in most of our slides today, you will see a fact about our program in the upper right-hand corner. And the very first one is actually about our team, the fact that we have had over 50 years of cumulative service in local government. And so who is the team? We'll tell you. My name is Anitra Henning, and I will be your moderator today. I am a senior management analyst and have worked on this program since it began in 2015. And my fun fact, just like the program, I'll give you a fun fact about myself, is that the United States was the fourth country I visited after I was born because my dad was in the military. So we'll start off with Kathy. So please let everyone know who you are and your fun fact.
Yes, thank you, Anitra, and good afternoon, going into evening, everybody. I'm Kathy Rodriguez. I am one of the Deputy Historic Preservation Officers for the City of San Antonio. I have the honor and pleasure to lead the Vacant Building team, which is a wonderful group of talented professionals who care very deeply about our city. My fun fact is the neighborhood that I live in. I came to live here after getting married, never lived in this neighborhood, don't have any relatives that live in this neighborhood, but coincidentally, my house is 1 block over, 5 blocks down from the house where my mother grew up. And I'm so happy and blessed that this neighborhood is here and that these buildings are still there. She was born in 1940, so her childhood home is right down the street and I get to pass it every day. Diane, you're up next.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Diane Sossenhagen. I'm a senior management analyst with the Office of Historic Preservation. My fun fact is I love to travel, and I've traveled to a lot of fun places around the world, and I'm really excited and can't wait to get back to doing that. So hopefully soon enough, but it's fun to be able to talk to you today about our program. So thank you again for joining us. Derek.
Derek, you might be on mute. We're not getting audio from you. So John, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, and then Derek will call in, and then we get to meet him later.
All right. So my name is John Sanchez. I'm a senior management analyst with the Vacant Building team. Been with the City of San Antonio now for about 14 years. And my fun fact is I am a San Antonio native. I grew up on East Craig Street. My mom still lives in my childhood home. And my fun fact was, when I was a kid, my favorite place ever was Burger Boy. And if anyone's ever been to Burger Boy, you know that they are the best burger joint in all of San Antonio. And I was just blessed that even when I was 5 years old, I already had this.
It looks like we lost your audio at the end too, John. I'm not sure what happened because you were going fine and then it dropped out. So let me briefly cover some of what we'll be talking about over the next 50 minutes or so. First off, Kathy and I will chat about why the Vacant Building Program is in the Office of Historic Preservation and how it fits in with other city programs. Diane will discuss the framework of the program, including fees and fee waivers available. Next, with Derek, we'll discuss why we take a multifaceted approach to finding vacant properties. Then John and I will chat about what an owner can do to come into compliance. We'll have a Q&A session towards the end. My colleague Claudia Guerra is monitoring the Q&A, and she'll collect your questions. And finally, we'll take a quick poll so you can actually pick our next virtual conversation in 2021. So to start, I want to kind of set the stage to share with you why we focus on vacant buildings. Like, what's the big deal? Like in San Antonio, we don't have the hyper vacancy like some cities in the Rust Belt in the Midwest. But any vacant property in poor condition can have a negative impact on its neighborhood. They can have negative impacts on the health, on the wealth, and community as a whole. So the most obvious thing is that they contribute to an unsafe environment, attracting crime, vagrancy, and vermin. Studies show that even a perceived threat to your safety can shift your body into a stress response. Another study showed that an increase in your heart rate there would be an increase in your heart rate simply by walking by a vacant lot. And it is, of course, well documented that a body under frequent stress can be harmed mentally and physically. A vacant boarded property can lower the value of properties around it. It's not just the houses right next door. A vacant property can negatively affect the values up to 500 feet away. And depending on the density of the street, the size of the lots, that can be, 5, 8, 10 houses away. Not to mention that the repair of deferred maintenance can be difficult when you're then fixing issues when they arrive, especially if it'll cost more to repair a property than it might be worth after the renovation. And finally, vacant properties cost us all as citizens of San Antonio because it can lead to increased costs from an outsized number of calls to fire, police, and code. Many factors can lead to vacancy and contribute to a cycle of vacancy. Some of these factors we within our department have no control over, like the job market or macro or microeconomic conditions. Others are more preventable, like owners dying without a will and creating complex property title issues throughout. So throughout 2021, we'll attempt to share information about more of these easily preventable factors. So the fun fact on the screen right now actually isn't about our vacant building program. It's actually about others. There are more than 550 vacant property registration ordinances in the United States. There are many municipalities in the country that are also trying to attempt to mitigate some of the negative effects of vacancy. So that's why we focus on vacant properties. But Kathy, can you tell us why this program is actually located in the Office of Historic Preservation? You're still on mute.
The mission of the Office of Historic Preservation is to conserve and preserve our building stock. The Vacant Building Program is a revitalization program and one that encourages and facilitates the reuse of vacant properties and the maintenance of vacant properties. Although the program was developed through a committee of other city departments and outside agencies, it made sense for this to be in the Office of Historic Preservation since it wasn't meant to be implemented like a typical code enforcement program. The idea is that the staff would work with property owners to find out what those challenges are or the reasons for vacancy and work with property owners to find long-term solutions. Our office has partnerships that are longstanding with neighborhood associations and other agencies within the city of San Antonio. And so it made sense for us to take this work on and to make it part of our purview. We do administer programs that are specific to designated historic properties, but there are other policies and programs that we participate in that are citywide. For example, the review of demolition permits. And we also partner with Development Services in review of the Building Standards Board agendas and those properties that become subject to those processes. And so it made sense for us to take on the vacant building program since we're also involved in those reviews.
So can you tell us a little bit about what the program looks like when it first began and how it's changed over time?
Certainly. So the program was first adopted in 2015. The pilot program was adopted in 2015 and was focused on properties located within the central business district, historic districts, historic landmarks, and a buffer around active military bases. At that time, we had a smaller team that was working those properties, but we did implement the program successfully, and there was support to expand the program. Although it's not citywide, the program area expanded to include neighborhood conservation districts, TERS districts, buffers around these particular program areas. I believe now it covers 116,000 parcels within the city limits of San Antonio.
So we are going to be talking about a lot of detail with respect to the program today. Can you kind of summarize for us like what the goals are of the VBP?
Absolutely. You know, we have people from across the United States that contact us to ask about our program. And the first thing they ask me is, well, how many properties are registered? And I know they ask that question because some might view registration numbers to be a measure of success. We actually see that success is a building that is being well maintained and repurposed so that they're not even subject to the ordinance. And so for us, success for the program is properties that are no longer vacant, that become occupied or maybe sold so that they can be rehabbed and occupied. And so we measure success by the number of properties that are no longer subject to our ordinance. And I think you have a fun fact about that.
I do. Since the start of our program, we've actually had over 700 properties that we have been able to deem as a success. And that is, you know, when the program first began, we were at 35 square miles and expanded to tripled in size to 112 square miles. So I think as time goes on, that number is going to continue to increase. So in conversations that I've had with people about the program overall, and they, you know, one of the questions that I get is people will ask me if we have like a carrot and a stick, like a reward and a deterrent within our program. Can you share a little bit about that?
So the program does have sticks, if you want to call them that. You know, we can, if we have a property that is not being maintained, is vacant, they are not registering and complying with the provisions of the ordinance, we can issue violations and we can take that property owner to municipal court. As I mentioned earlier, that's not really a measure of success. So we try to work with property owners so that we don't have to file those particular cases. Sometimes it's simple conversations with property owners. We can assist them if they're interested in selling their property, but they're not sure where to post it or how to find a realtor. We have realtors that are members of our rehabber club. And we also, with the property owner's permission, can help them promote the sale of a property that they're interested in selling. For many of the
sorry. Oh, go ahead.
To add one more thing. So single family properties, as long as they meet the minimum standard of care, meaning it doesn't look scary, the windows are not boarded up, it is painted, there's no fascia boards that are falling. As long as it meets the minimum standard of care, it can remain vacant and it would no longer be subject to the ordinance. So they would not need to register and they would not need to have an annual inspection.
So in a little bit, Derek and I are going to discuss how properties come into our program inventory, which does include information from other departments. Code enforcement has about 100 people covering the entire city within Development Services Department, and they focus partially on owners maintaining their property's condition. So how does the vacant building program fit in with code enforcement as it exists right now?
So I think it's a nice complement to the property maintenance code and the dangerous premise provisions. And I actually see that we fit somewhere in the middle. So if there's a vacant structure that's not being well maintained, if we can engage with that property owner and resolve those issues, then we can potentially prevent a property from getting into such disrepair that it becomes a dangerous premise. And so I kind of see it falling in between just basic property maintenance, high weeds, things of that nature. And those structures that have been abandoned for many years, sometimes decades, that have fallen into disrepair and then sometimes find themselves in front of the Building Standards Board, resulting in a city ordered demolition. So I feel like our program can have a positive impact on those vacant properties and hopefully prevent the number of them that do go before the Building Standards Board.
This year, we've all dealt with the effects of a global pandemic, amongst other things. So how has that changed things for vacant building staff? And how has that changed the way that we interact and work with owners, if at all?
So it's true. I believe it was beginning in March when the pandemic had set in and a lot of the businesses were being shut down, and we ourselves, our department, were having to go to remote operations since we couldn't go to the office. In San Antonio, construction activity continued and permits were still being offered. And so we continued to implement the program even through the onset of the pandemic. Where we could, we tried to automate some of our services so that customers could access, for example, online payments so that they could pay their registration fees and not have to come to the building. We also have a customer phone line that is dedicated to vacant building staff and their customers, as well as a email where customers can reach us. And quite frankly, we maintain the same level of personal service that we have given to our customers even before the pandemic set in. Diane and Derek and Anitra, you're all senior management analysts, but actually you take on the role of case managers and facilitators, and you work closely with property owners. And that communication and engagement was able to continue through the onset of the pandemic because of kind of our technology tools that we were able to use. And then also the ordinance already had provisions regarding fee waivers and registration extensions. And so the case managers were able to utilize those in working with property owners who expressed hardships or conditions as a result of the pandemic. But I'm proud to say that that same level of care and attention that we gave to customers when the pandemic began, when people really needed additional help, that's honestly the same level of personal attention and service that the team has been providing even before the pandemic set in.
Perfect. And so that actually leads us to Diane to kind of talk about the structure of the program, kind of the nuts and bolts of the program's framework. So my first question seems like a really simple question, but Diane, what does vacant mean?
That's a great question. We get that question quite a bit. So vacant, as defined by our ordinance, is a building, structure, or house where all lawful activity has ceased or reasonably appears to have ceased for 30 days. So if there's no activity going on inside the property, if we don't see any active utility usage, such as water or electricity, then we do consider that property as vacant, and that's when we start our process.
So when a vacant property is listed in the program inventory, does that mean that the City of San Antonio is about to wrestle control of the property from the property owner?
Definitely not. We definitely have a great process that we take the steps and to make sure that we work with the property owner to get the property back to what we call our standard of care.
So I'm going to take a pause just for a split second. If you guys do have questions, our attendees, please use the Q&A function because that's where we'll be able to actually pull those out and respond to you on that Q&A side and not on the chat side. So I've switched over to our next slide for just a moment, so we can talk about the hard structure of the program. So when a property is first added to the program inventory, what happens next? Do you reach out to them right away and require that they fix the property in 10 days?
Right. So what happens is the process goes like this. So we have a property that's identified as potentially vacant. So after that, we observe the building for 30 days to determine if it is indeed vacant. Again, vacant by the definition is a building, structure, house that has any activity that is ceased for 30 days. So we do the observation for 30 days to make sure that it's indeed vacant. After this happens, a notice letter is mailed to the property owner that we find that it's listed in VCAD, the Bexar County Appraisal District, and we mail it to that address. We also we also post a notice on the building itself. That's what we call our hang tags. And the hang tags have the standard of care violations on there that have been violated by that particular building, as well as our contact name, the case manager's name, and their phone number. So that way they can reach out to us as soon as possible. After that process, we mail those forms, and the owner has 90 days to register. We give this property owner 90 days. It's so that way they have more time to think about what exterior work needs to be done, and provide a really good timeline for this work. We know it takes time, and it's a financial obligation as well. So we want to give the property owner plenty of time to think about a really good action plan and a timeline for all the repairs that need to be done.
So say I'm an owner, we'll call me Samantha Smith, and I tell you that I don't want to do anything to my property because I think my property is perfect, but in fact it's actually falling over. What would you tell me?
Well, first of all, I would say, Samantha, we really need to take a look at this property again. If it's falling over, it's causing some serious issues. There's some serious issues there, and to the owner as well as the neighborhood itself. So what I asked the property owner to do again is I will give her the registration forms, let her explain to her what needs to be done to the property. And if she doesn't comply, well, then we have steps for that as well. If she doesn't comply to our formats, the 90 days, if she doesn't send it in, then we do a final posting on the building that gives her one last chance to really look into it and to call us and to come up with the plan. If that doesn't happen, then unfortunately we do have to take her case to municipal court and file court cases on the violations on the property.
I suppose you have motivated me to fix a couple things on my property, but I think it's probably going to take me a while to fix everything because I'm paying cash and I can't get a loan. But if I'm also paying you money to register in the program, that's even less cash that I have. How can you help me out with that?
Absolutely. Our program is really good about offering fee waivers and extensions. Now, yes, there are fees to the program, but what we tell the property owner is that we'd rather have them put that money back into the property. I mean, that makes more sense to us and definitely the property owner. Now, fee waivers, we have different types of fee waivers, and there's 5 of them. If one is if the property was devastated by a catastrophe in the last 30 days, that's one. The second one is the owner is indigent. Okay, we'll definitely take that into consideration. If the owner is deceased, if there's a building permit obtained, then that means there's definitely work being done. Or if it's a non-single family residence that's at the standard of care for the past 2 years. So there are some really good options, and we definitely work with property owners to make this happen for them, because we understand financially it's tough, and right now a lot of things are happening and it's hard to get some things done. So we're really flexible on that, and we're as flexible as the ordinance allows us to be. But we do want to work with our property owner because, again, like Kathy mentioned, my goal is not to take the owner to municipal court. My goal is to have the owner fix the property back to the standard of care and have it being rented, lived in, or whatever the issue may be.
So I'm working on my property now. Do I have to keep talking to you?
Absolutely. Communication is key. And I think that's the biggest takeaway from this program is we know things happen. We understand life happens, things change. But as long as you keep in contact with your case manager and let us know what's going on with the property, we'll definitely work with you on that.
So I'm done now. I finished working on my property. It's beautiful again. So what happens now?
Right. So absolutely. Throughout this process, the case managers do inspections. So we definitely go out and check the properties to inspect and to monitor the progress. And once you call me and tell me, hey, Diane, my property's done, I will definitely go do a final inspection to make sure that it meets our standard of care. And if it's done, it's great. We're done here. Then we remove you from our inventory and you're good to go.
So I'm going to step out of my Samantha Smith role for just a second and acknowledge one of the questions that came in the Q&A. The 700 plus properties that we've removed from our program inventory as successes are properties that were in our program inventory, received notice from us, and then the property was improved, like Samantha Smith's property, or has become reoccupied, and then we removed it from our program inventory. So Diane, I'm going to be a different owner now, Joanna Jones, and I bought this property 10 years ago, and I've done no maintenance in that time, but I am thinking about selling it now. So what are my options?
Great. I mean, that's another great option. Some people decide that they'd rather sell the properties. So we offer fee waivers for when people do the work on the property, but when people are trying to actively sell the property, we offer fee extensions. So we ask them to let us know how long has the property been for sale? When did it go on the market? Do you have a realtor? What's the MLS number? We just want to gather information so we can give you the proper extension. And once that happens, we work with you, and we'll work with you on it's a case-by-case basis, but we'll work with you to make sure that we give you the ample time to get your property on the market and hopefully it sells.
So I'm a third owner now. I have lots of people in my head. I'm Natalie Morales. So I believe that my house looks really good. I'm about to move out of my house because I'm going to sell it, and I've been doing work on it, in preparation for selling it. So do I have to register in the program?
Well, we definitely want you to keep in contact with us. If your property's up for sale, that's definitely an option for a fee extension. Just keep us posted on how it's coming along. Again, communication is key, and that's the big thing that's the takeaway we want property owners to understand is just let us know what's going on. But we'll definitely work with you. Keep us posted. Let us know what's going on with the property, and we'll definitely work with you.
But my house is pristine. It was actually just featured on the front of a real estate magazine. So do I actually have to register in your program if my house is magazine worthy?
No, if the property meets the standard of care, and it sounds like it does, again, our purview of the program is the exterior, then you're exempt from the program and you do not have to register with us.
That's good news for me, Natalie Morales. So our program fact on this slide is the fact that we have around 900 properties currently active in our program inventory. And with 3 case managers, that's a hefty number for each of us. So we work really hard to follow up with all of the properties that we have, but we absolutely do appreciate the help from the public in helping us know what's going on with properties in their neighborhoods. So that takes us to Derek, who spends a good deal of time out in the field and conducts our formal program surveys in our program area. So let's start with the basic stats. Like, how big is the program area?
Yeah, so the program area is about 112,000 parcels, or 112 square miles. It's about 116,000 parcels. And parcels are just the usually square blocks of land that a house is on. And it counts about 22% of San Antonio as far as like land area goes, right? So it's pretty sizable. You don't get to 22% of San Antonio with just historic districts, though. So the program area accounts for historic districts. It accounts for neighborhood conservation districts, TERS districts, which I always get this wrong, but I believe it is tax increment reinvestment zones, and the military bases as well. And then further, there is a half-mile buffer around all of those to get to our 116,000 parcels. This is dynamic. So as we add historic districts in the city, as TERS districts are added, you can be out of the program area and then come into it. So a lot of things can happen somewhat quickly, you know, at a certain fast speed for the city.
Yes, so for everyone watching, our website is sanantonio.gov/vacant building. And on our website is the map that I just showed you as Derek was listing off our program area. And it also, I don't know if you mentioned, it's also historic landmarks as well, which is an expected bit. So if you click on a parcel in our map, like if you zoom in or if you add or enter an address in the upper right-hand corner, trying to zoom in enough, and you click on a parcel when you're not using the tools, then it will tell you if a property is in the program area, maybe. You'll just have to trust me. It will pop up with a little box that will tell you when it's working if the property is in our program area and which case manager actually handles that part of the city. Which is another way I can show you. So each of our case management zones, like I have zone 2, which is the Central Business District, plus area South. I have Dignity Hill Historic District, Whispering Oaks Neighborhood Conservation District, the Northeast Corridor TERS. John has the rest of the east side outside of Dignity Hill and areas north of downtown. Diane has the Mission District, plus areas west and northwest of town. So we, even though we are not in all of the city, we do cover quite a bit. So it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to get through all of it. So Derek, as we identify properties and add them to the program area, we use like several different methods and several different inputs. Can you talk us through those?
Yeah, so the biggest one is going to be surveying. It's somewhat like a historic survey for those on the call that are familiar with that. It involves me walking around and I have an app that we use and it notes things like condition, vacant, yes or no, what the use is. And all these are important for us so that we can keep track of single family, multifamily, commercial, those properties. And then I note whether they appear vacant or not, or like are definitely vacant. For those properties that are on the edge that are possible, that you can't necessarily verify using typical condition assessments or things like a mail being piled up in a mailbox, that's a pretty good indicator, right? If you're unable to confirm through that, we also have access to USPS vacancy data and then public utility data to confirm vacant yes or no. We also have a report function. So on our website, you can go to report a vacant building, and then that goes straight to the Vacant Building Program email. It's right there on the slide, vbp@sanantonio.gov. It'll ask you some regular questions. What's your phone number? What's your email address? What's the vacant building in question? You can provide an anonymous report. So if you're somewhat worried about maybe your neighbor is going to find out, I can guarantee you that they won't unless I tell them, which I won't. So don't worry about that. But if you want to be anonymous, you're more than in your right to do so. And then you'll have the address. We will perform an inspection on that. Other ways, you can call in, of course, and then generally there's the opportunity for us to just see them as we're going about our day, right? So it's not necessarily a formal survey, but maybe we're on our way to perform an inspection someplace else, and then we see a vacant building, so we pull over and add it, various different ways.
So obviously, COVID has meant a temporary end to in-person neighborhood association meetings. I'm going to ask your opinion specifically. Do you think that neighborhood associations should still try to reach out to their residents in different ways?
Yeah, so certainly if they have the ability to, right? I know most neighborhood associations are going to have, at the very least, a mailing list. So they can put data or they can put information in that mailing list to say, hey, here's how you can report a vacant building, or could send out the map that we have. So maybe neighbors have thought, oh, this building's been vacant for like 5 or 6 years. Of course, the city has to know about it, right? That's not always the case. We're aware of that. It's certainly not our department either, because those buffer zones, some of those are like in nooks and crannies. And so I would say if you have a vacant building that you are particularly aware of, or maybe it's a problem for your neighborhood, maybe it's sort of your, not necessarily a hill to die on, but like it's that thing that you like, wow, this house is so great, right? I really, really would just love it. Like, oh, it could be such a great house. Send it to us, because at the very least, I'll just say, hey, it's already in our inventory, but thank you. The worst answer to a question you can always get is thank you, we already have it. So please send us to those. If you do have digital neighborhood association meetings, we are willing to come to those, right? So you'll just send us an email to that vbp@sanantonio.gov, request that one of us show up, it'll probably be me, to your neighborhood association meeting, and I'll be there and I'll say, hi, hello, let's talk about vacancy in your neighborhood, right? And then maybe a case manager will come along in case you've already identified, maybe you've already done the legwork, right? Maybe you're coming to us with 7 or 8 buildings, and we can just hit the ground running on those. So we're willing to show up. If it was, pre-pandemic, we would be at your neighborhood association meetings, but we're still willing and able to be there digitally. So please reach out to us. That would be great, and we're happy to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Just kind of going back to what you were talking about as far as how we may not necessarily know about a property, even though you think that we probably should. It's, I think, important to note that this is very much an inexact science. We do the best we can, and we get resources from different sources and do various ways of trying to capture all of the properties that are in poor condition that are currently vacant, but we definitely miss some. So we absolutely appreciate neighbors letting us know what they know about their neighborhood. So Derek, what are some other ways that we do program-related outreach?
Just a real easy one, we could say what we're doing right now, right? We are going to start a series of webinars. I'm sure that there will be information about those later on. I've already seen the slides, so don't worry, they will be there. We also offer an open house. In the past, it's been at One Stop, which, if you're unfamiliar with the language, One stop is 1901 South Alamo. It is where our office is. It's the general like development land building. So we've held open houses where property owners or property managers who have received a notice to register can come in and ask questions that they have. Similar to what Anitra had mentioned, it's not an exact science, right? So if you're like, why am I getting this? I'm not in a historic district. As you already know, we're not just in historic districts. That's a common question. You might say, it's only been vacant for a while. We're working on it, right? All these are all very real things that happen to people all the time, right? And so it's easier to talk in person about some of those things rather than on the phone. So we offer these in-person abilities. Got a little donuts, got a little coffee. You can chat with us about your property. And then we're also trying to do other outreach efforts, right? So we've talked about a vacant building tour where members that are in the registry have a chance to market their structures. We do marketing in general for things. So outreach as a whole, it's taking on a different meaning under COVID, of course, right? More digital outreach. But there's going to be a time when we're back to physical outreach. And so it's good for us to have options.
Absolutely. So Derek mentioned how he does surveying of our program area, and our fact about our program on this slide is that he surveyed over 6,500 parcels in 2020. And so that actually equates to about 40% of his workdays outside surveying, which also includes South Texas in the summertime. So that's, it's fun. So with that though, doing these detailed surveys that he did, it still only he was only able to cover about 6% of our program area. Obviously, what our case managers were also out doing our inspections, and like he mentioned, we'll see a property that catches our attention, we'll add it that way. But it just illustrates the point even more that we really cannot do this without your help in reporting properties to us. And so that actually takes us to John to talk about property conditions. So far we've talked about the program process, how we identify properties. And so now we'll discuss those things on a property that we talked to you about, owners preparing. As we discussed with Diane earlier, our program treats commercial properties a little differently than single family properties. The ordinance that governs our program says that a single family property is exempt from the program if it meets the maintenance standard of care. So my first question is, John, what is the maintenance standard of care?
The standard of care. So as they mentioned earlier, the standard of care is a very critical part of the vacant building program. So as they mentioned, two criteria have to be met for a single family property to be considered in violation of the vacant building ordinance. One, obviously that it's vacant, and the second one is the standard of care. Now, the standard of care, the entire listing can be found on our website. It's actually part of the ordinance. And if you've ever received one of our hang tags on the property, if you look at the back, the standard of care is actually listed on the back. We don't have time today to go through every single bullet point for the standard of care. But, as myself and the team go out into the field, you regularly start to see the same type of very common violations. And I'm just going to go through a few of those real quickly because, we don't have enough time to go through all of them, just to kind of give people an idea of what the standard of care does cover. And also gives you an idea of maybe what you should be on the lookout for when you think you see a vacant property, to make sure that it's not only vacant, but also in violation of the standard of care. So one of the most common violations that we see has to deal with the paint. Now, all these violations I'm going to talk about must be observable from the public right of way. So we are not allowed to step foot on someone's property. We can't go to the backyard or, something like that. It's got to be observable from the public right of way, which is commonly the sidewalk or the street. Okay. So some of the more common ones that we see will pertain to chipped and peeling paint. If you can see chipped or peeling paint from the public right of way, that is something that we would discuss with a property owner, letting them know that they're in violation of the standard of care and that they would need to repaint those areas that appear chipped and peeling from the public right of way. Another very common one that we see is a missing address. I'm not sure what happens to some of the addresses on vacant structures, but they magically disappear. The property address must be visible from the street. Another item that we see, unfortunately, pertains to the foundation. All the structures must be capable, or I should say all the foundations of vacant structures must be capable of safely supporting that imposed load on them. And although we're not engineers by any means, sometimes when you're standing in the public right of way, it's clearly obvious that a house has serious foundation issues because it's basically collapsed onto itself. And so a bad foundation would be considered a violation of the standard of care. The exterior walls of a property, it doesn't matter whether it's brick, stone, asbestos shingles, wood siding, that envelope, if you will, for the property needs to be in good repair and free from any rotting materials, loose materials, missing holes, breaks, anything like that. Nothing that would admit rain or rodents. That envelope of the exterior walls needs to be secure. As far as like the roof goes, the roof and the drainage system, if half the shingles are missing, if there's holes in the roof, if the gutters have fallen off, if the gutters are not performing the way they were intended, if the chimney's bricks have collapsed, if the chimney's missing, that would certainly be considered a violation right there. Porch steps, the porch itself, the rails, balconies, anything like that needs to be in good repair. Again, able to maintain the load that's placed on it. Those would certainly be violations, but probably the most common violation that we see at some of these vacant structures has to deal with the windows and the doors. All the glass, the screens, the operation of the windows, the hardware for the windows, all must be in good working condition. And it's the same for the doors. The doors can't have rotting materials. The hardware needs to be in place. They need to be in good sound repair in order for them to be considered in compliance. And this kind of brings us kind of full circle to like the biggest violation that we see, which is plywood being used to secure a property. Plywood over windows, plywood over doors, that is a violation of the vacant building ordinance. And usually we'll immediately get pushback from a property owner and they'll say, but that's what I'm using to secure my property so that no one breaks in. We're very flexible with this and we understand the reason behind it. But plywood over windows and doors needs to be treated as a temporary securing measure. It's okay. Again, it's a very key word. Temporary securing measure. This cannot be one of those issues where plywood's put over windows and doors and they're like, okay, we're good. And 10 years later, nothing's done. This is one of the reasons why this ordinance is in effect. And will kind of bring us to our next part of the presentation, which is the plan of action.
Yeah, so exactly. When an owner turns in a registration form, part of that does include writing up a plan of action. So what is that and what does it do?
So the plan of action is the most important part of the registration document. It is an owner submitted plan that addresses a reasonable timeline for all the observed standard of care violations of that particular property. Case managers are going to work with property owners to ensure that the action plan is reasonable and that future progress is being made. And as far as we're concerned, progress equals compliance. We're not code compliant, or code compliance, I should say. We're not on like a 30, 60, or 90-day time frame or window. We don't have deadlines. For us, success equals either achievement of addressing all the standard of care violations or reoccupation of the property.
So does a property owner have to do a, say, $50,000 renovation on their vacant property to come into compliance?
Absolutely not. You know, I always will, as I'm speaking with a property owner, and say, if you have chipped and peeling paint, all that's really required is primer. I mean, obviously, we'd love to see, some beautiful paint job done, but that's not necessary. We just want to ensure that any potential rot to, say, an exterior wood siding is ceased immediately. And paint is one of the best ways to counter that kind of decay. Same thing with premises identification. You just go down to Home Depot or Lowe's, buy a few numbers, and that's one less violation for you to worry about. So we're very flexible, and we don't expect a $50,000 renovation by any means.
Yeah, absolutely, because these properties didn't get into the condition like overnight. So often there's not a quick fix, and so we understand too that there's all sorts of factors that can make the progress slower than like something that's being done with the construction loan, where they're doing it as like a 3-month project. So incremental forward movement, is all that we ask for. So our program fact on this slide is that this year in 2020, we had over 200 properties that were deemed successes, properties that were improved to the standard of care or reoccupied. And since we're running a little bit behind time, we'll only do one of our properties to kind of talk about what we see when we look at a property. So this is a property that is in Dignity Hill Historic District, and it was actually in our program inventory for a couple of years before it was purchased last year. So John, what do you see here that's in violation of the standard of care?
So this is kind of a classic example of, a property that we would identify. And I wish we had several photos, of the left and the right of the property to really give you a good grasp of the different violations that were present. But the most obvious one that you can see is the plywood over the windows and the doors. If you look real closely where the property front wall meets the ground, you'll see that what we call like foundation skirting, where the exterior wall kind of meets the ground, was missing. Also present here was part of the porch roof was actually kind of starting to sag down. And then there was also some minor paint violations that we found here. So this is something where the case manager would get with the property owner, discuss the violations that were present, discuss a reasonable timeline to get these violations addressed, and then check for progress as the year goes on. Now, as you can see, this property owner went way above and beyond what we asked for. Not only did they address the windows and the doors, they kind of created there a more significant porch, addressed all exterior wall issues, completely repainted the home, and then even put a new roof on there, in addition to landscaping. So this really went from what we call vacant to vibrant. It was really an amazing job. And, one thing that we do for property owners too is we always want to be a good resource for them. So during a rehab, especially one of this magnitude, questions about, the city process will come up, when it comes to permitting, maybe zoning, et cetera. And so we always like to give people that direct line to that contact, and maybe even let that contact know that, hey, one of our property owners is going to give you a call. Do you mind answering their questions so that they can continue on with that rehabilitation, versus you just basically opening the phone book and trying to figure out who's the best resource with the city of San Antonio. In this particular case as well, this particular property right now is actually vacant, but as we discussed earlier, it is certainly above the standard of care. It's well above the standard of care. And so it's not subject to the program, but we did want to offer marketing assistance to this particular property owner. So on Fridays on our social media channels, when some of our great success properties have gone from vacant to vibrant and are now for sale, you'll see those come up. We kind of joke and say it's for sale Friday. But this particular property, I think, was posted maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it's actually currently for sale.
All righty. So we'll do this one just so you guys can see, but we don't have time to discuss. So we can actually get to a couple of questions. So they did a very nice renovation on this property in Keystone Historic District. So what have we discussed today? We focus on vacant properties because they can have harmful effects in many ways in our community. Our program aims to encourage repair and reoccupancy of vacant properties. And while our program does have registration fees, we are more focused on seeing properties repaired as opposed to just trying to collect fees, which is why we have 5 different fee waivers. We would love to attend your virtual neighborhood association meetings for neighborhoods that are within our program area to talk about vacancy in your neighborhood. And so, as I mentioned, these properties did not deteriorate overnight. So if an owner is working towards repairing and reoccupying property, that is a very good thing. So we will take a couple of questions in just a moment, but we need your help. Early on, I mentioned that there are some things that we can do to help reduce future vacancy, some low-hanging fruit, as it were. Our next virtual meeting will be in March of next year, and you can tell us what you want to learn about first. So if you have a mobile device or you're on a computer, you can go to menti.com, that's MENTI.com, and enter in the code that's on the screen, 4239882. And then you can tell us which of the subjects you're most interested in. And these are some things that are based on all the conversations that we've had with property owners in our time working on this program. So the first one is about transfer on death deeds, which is something that's relatively new to the state of Texas, to try and confer your property to someone else. We'll also talk in this one about wills and then local legal services for people living below the median income. The second topic would be about preventing heir property, which is related to people dying without wills, where multiple people own one property, and how you can clear title issues. And also we talk about ways that you could possibly avoid tax foreclosure. And the third topic would be working with real estate agents. We have talked to plenty of property owners who aren't completely clear on what it means to work with a real estate agent, and they might have some misconceptions about if the fees are involved or if they have like upfront costs. We'd also talk about selling properties in any condition and knowing your property's value. So you'd go to menti.com, enter 4239882. And if you go there right now, we'll be able to learn the results of our voting right away, which would be unlike what happened on Tuesday. So I also have the website on our next slide, so we can take a couple of questions. Claudia, can you tell us what we've been hearing from some of our attendees so far?
So, Anitra, the questions are fairly varied, but there is one that comes up a lot, and that's whether there's any assistance or grants, especially for the elderly or those who may be going through financial difficulty.
Kathy, do you want to take that one?
Yes, definitely. So very quickly, first of all, a lot of these questions, if we can't get to them, please contact us. We'd be happy to talk about your questions and connect you with the resources and give you a complete answer. Keep in mind the properties that we are focused on in our program are vacant properties. So we're not talking about property owners living in a home that needs maintenance. So these are vacant properties. We do not have grant programs that we offer through our office, but when we hear of opportunities for non-occupied or non-owner occupied properties to get assistance, we definitely push that information to our property owners. If you are having financial hardships, as we mentioned, the ordinance does allow some variances. It allows you to work through those as long as you're communicating with us. And also, this is an opportunity for property owners. Sometimes we hold on to properties for sentimental reasons, but we really don't have the financial means to be able to affect them, to keep them well maintained. It may be time to think about selling that property. We certainly aren't out there to push property owners to do anything like that, but what we do want them to consider is that they own this property it's usually investment property, and they need to be a responsible property owner and be aware of what some of the requirements might be. That way they can make the decision that's best for them. And that's what our role is to make them aware of what those regulations are, maybe connect them with nonprofits or partner agencies that could provide them assistance, or answer questions, you know, they just may not know how to market a property. And as Anitra said, you know, we can help connect them with some professionals, and we can also provide assistance when possible.
Great. Claudia, is there another question that we could answer in our overtime where we are right now?
I thought a really short one, and then Anitra and Kathy, I think you both have mentioned that you will be responding to all of the questions by email. So whatever we don't get to today, I've captured all of those, and we'll make sure that we get those out to you quickly. Here are two very fast questions. Can the 311 app be used to report a vacant building? And is it possible to post the information about the program on the Nextdoor app?
So I'll take a stab at that. So I use the 311 app myself, and there are some options on there. Vacant property is not one of them, but if you call 311, oh, Derek is saying vacant property is one of them on the app. No, okay. But if you call the 311 number, they can get you to us so that we can get the information that way. And I love the suggestion of working with 311 to see if we can get that put on the app. And yes, also we will work to put some information on Nextdoor as well. Thank you for those suggestions.
And then there are a lot of good questions, as I mentioned, and some of them are going to require a little bit more detail. But people have general questions about the ordinance itself, and when is the standard of maintenance ended, and when does the ordinance require that the building be occupied, and if not, then it should be registered. Some questions along that end, some ideas for facilitation, and then some general goodwill for the panelists in the program, for, you know, especially posting this on Facebook, that it was really been a good way for people to connect with you guys.
So thank you for all of those questions. We will do our best to answer those questions. A lot of this information is available on our website, and I know sometimes it's hard to navigate through websites. Feel free to call us. We'd be happy to walk you through and get you the link to the list of properties that are in the inventory, as well as to the ordinance itself. One thing I wanted to say, property owners, you know, they do have a right to hold a property and for it to be vacant. But they need to meet that standard of care so that they can continue to be good neighbors. We talked a lot about single family properties today. As long as they meet the standard of care and they can keep their property vacant if that's what they wish to do. Commercial property, same thing. If they can remain vacant, they need to meet the standard of care. They need to register on an annual basis, and they need to be inspected annually. And so we would love to talk more about those provisions of the ordinance and those two distinctions between single family and non-single family. Please contact us. Any of us on the OHP website is a directory of all staff, but we are easy to reach. I believe the number and the email is on the screen right now.
Yes, it is. And just to reiterate, because we did run over, which is not an uncommon thing because we all, you know, have lots to share about this program. So it's not unexpected. We will take the questions that we did not get to today and provide answers and email everyone who has registered for our event today. So I'm going to switch over and see. So this is completely unlike the presidential election because here are your answers right now. So on March 24th, 2021, we are going to be talking about how to clear property title and how to avoid tax foreclosure, because that is what people wanted to see the most. So this survey is going to actually be open for 24 hours. So if you weren't able to go on today, if you didn't want to click away, thought you might lose us, you can still put in your vote which is also like the election, but we will have the answer. It's not likely to change that significantly. So we'll be happy to talk about that in a couple of months. So I want to thank everybody for making your voice heard, and thank you for joining us today. Please do visit our website, sanantonio.gov/vacant building. You can email us at vbp@sanantonio.gov or call us on the Vacant Building Hotline at 210-207-7244. So thank you so much for joining us today to learn more about how we help property owners take their properties from vacant to vibrant. Please enjoy the rest of your evening.